The first time my mother cooked for us, my wife smiled, but didn't touch the food. She claimed she wasn't hungry. The second time, she said she already ate at work. By the third time, I noticed the pattern. Every single meal my mother made, my wife avoided. At first, I thought it was pride. My mother noticed too. One evening after dinner, she laughed softly and asked, "Does my cooking scare you that much?" My wife froze, not offended, afraid. That was the first thing that bothered me. The second was what happened later that night. I woke up thirsty and walked into the kitchen. My wife was standing by the sink, rinsing her mouth, again and again. Then I noticed the bowl beside her, my mother's soup, almost untouched. My wife washed her mouth twice after pretending to taste it, like she was trying to get rid of the flavor completely. I said her name softly. She nearly jumped. The next morning, I confronted her. "Why won't you eat my mother's food?" She went pale instantly, then looked toward the living room to make sure my mother wasn't nearby. And when she finally answered, her voice barely came out. "Because the last person who did," she swallowed hard, "ended up in the hospital." The next morning, my mother made tea. My wife refused to touch it, not rudely, just quietly pushed the cup away. By afternoon, things got worse. I came home early and found my wife throwing away groceries my mother bought. Milk, bread, spices, all unopened. "What are you doing?" I asked. "She shouldn't be choosing what we eat," she replied instantly. Too instantly. That night, my mother cooked again. This time, I watched carefully. My wife forced herself to take one spoonful. Then her hand started shaking. The spoon slipped from her fingers. My mother watched her silently, almost like she was waiting for something. Around 2 a.m., I woke up and realized my wife wasn't beside me. I walked toward the kitchen. The lights were on. She stood there alone, cooking noodles quietly for herself. My stomach tightened. "You're hungry?" I asked. She jumped slightly and turned around, then looked past me, toward our bedroom, making sure my mother wasn't awake. "You could have eaten earlier," I said. She swallowed hard. "I'd rather stay hungry." I frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" She looked down at the pot, then said something so quietly I almost missed it. "Because being hungry is safer." The next morning, my wife acted like nothing happened. She made breakfast for me herself, eggs, toast, coffee. But when my mother walked into the kitchen, my wife quietly threw her own plate away, untouched. My mother noticed. She didn't say anything. That silence felt worse. Later that afternoon, my mother offered my wife some fruit she had sliced. My wife stared at it for 2 seconds too long, then claimed she was feeling sick. That's when I stopped believing this was normal. That night, I decided to test something. When my mother wasn't looking, I switched our plates. My wife froze the second she noticed. Her face drained instantly. "Don't," she whispered. I frowned. "Why?" She looked directly at my mother for the first time all day, then said quietly, "Because she knows which plate is yours." My mother slowly lifted her eyes toward us and smiled. I couldn't sleep after that. My wife's words kept replaying in my head. She knows which plate is yours. The next evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house smelled like stew. My mother was cooking. My wife was nowhere downstairs. I found her in our room packing snacks into a small bag: crackers, bottled water, cereal bars, emergency food. My stomach twisted. "Why are you hiding food?" I asked. She looked exhausted. "Because your mother doesn't like when I cook for myself." Downstairs, my mother called my name. Dinner was ready. At the table, I watched carefully. My mother served me first, then my wife, then herself. Everything looked normal, until my wife quietly switched her glass of water with mine under the table. Fast, practiced, like she'd done it before. I stared at her. "What are you doing?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. Then she whispered, "She changes mine when you're not looking." A chair scraped slowly across the floor. My mother stood up, and this time, she didn't deny it. My mother stayed standing beside the table, calm, almost relieved. I looked at her. "You switch her food?" My wife's breathing turned uneven beside me, but my mother only sighed softly. "She noticed faster than the others." The room went cold. "The others?" I asked. My wife grabbed my arm immediately. "Don't," she whispered, but I pulled away. "No, tell me." My mother sat down slowly, then folded her hands like she was finally tired of hiding it. "Your father got sick first," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "He wasn't supposed to die that quickly." I stared at her. "What are you saying?" She looked directly at my wife. "She figured it out after the tea." My chest went hollow. "You poisoned her?" I asked. My voice barely sounded like mine. My mother's expression didn't change. "Not enough to kill her." Silence slammed into the room. My wife started crying quietly beside me. Then my mother said the words that truly shattered me. "I was trying to protect you from becoming like your father." I froze, because suddenly, this wasn't about food anymore. It was about what my mother believed ran inside me, too. My wife survived the night. Barely. By morning, she was still weak beside me when her words finally came back. "The last person who ate your mother's food ended up in the hospital." She wasn't talking about herself. She was talking about my father. I found my mother in the kitchen making breakfast, like nothing had happened, like my wife hadn't spent the entire night shaking with fever. "Why did you kill him?" I asked. Her hand paused briefly over the pot. Then she kept stirring. "He wanted another wife," she said calmly. "A second family, a double life." The room went cold. "So you poisoned him?" This time she faced me fully. "I was trying to save this family." I heard movement behind me. My wife stood weakly in the hallway, holding the wall for support. The second my mother looked at her, she flinched. That scared me more than the confession. Then I remembered something else. The day my father died, my mother cooked his favorite soup. The same soup my wife refused to touch last night. My mother turned back to the stove calmly, stirring breakfast again. And for the first time in my life, I understood why my wife would rather stay hungry. The next morning, my wife packed a suitcase, not angrily, not dramatically, quietly, like someone who had already made this decision a long time ago. I stood in the doorway watching her fold clothes with trembling hands. "You're leaving?" I asked. She didn't look at me immediately. "I can't stay in this house anymore." Downstairs, I could hear pots moving in the kitchen. My mother was cooking again, like always. "She confessed," I said. That finally made my wife stop. Her eyes closed for a second, not shocked, just exhausted. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "I know." A long silence stretched between us. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "She used to watch me eat." I frowned. "What?" "Every meal," she said quietly. "She'd sit there and stare until I finished everything on my plate." My chest felt tight. "And after your father died," she continued, "she told me something I'll never forget." I swallowed hard. "What did she say?" My wife looked toward the bedroom door. toward the kitchen downstairs, then back at me. She said, "A woman should do whatever it takes to keep her family from falling apart." My wife zipped the suitcase shut. The sound felt final. Downstairs, I heard my mother humming softly in the kitchen, like this was a normal morning, like she hadn't just admitted to poisoning my father. "You should have told me sooner," I said quietly. My wife laughed once, bitterly. "You wouldn't have believed me." The worst part was, she was right. A smell drifted upstairs. Fresh bread, tea, breakfast. My wife immediately went still. Every muscle in her body tightened at once. Then my mother's voice echoed from downstairs. "Come eat before it gets cold." My wife looked terrified, not nervous. Terrified. "She still thinks she can fix things with food," she whispered. I frowned. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, footsteps started climbing the stairs slowly, one step at a time, unhurried, certain. My mother appeared in the hallway holding a tray, tea, bread, eggs, and that same calm expression. She looked at my wife first, then at me, and smiled softly. "You both need to eat," she said. My wife grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt, then whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Don't let her watch you swallow." Something inside me finally snapped. "Get out," I said. My mother blinked slowly from the bedroom doorway, still holding the tray of tea and bread. "What?" I said, "Leave the room." For a second, nobody moved. Then my mother carefully placed the tray on the dresser. Her smile faded just slightly, but she walked out without arguing. The second the door closed, my wife let out a shaky breath, like she'd been holding it the entire time. "You need to leave this house," she whispered. I stared at her. "You really think she'd hurt me too?" She looked at me with genuine fear. "You still don't understand how far she'll go." An hour later, I drove us across town to a crowded roadside restaurant. Bright daylight, loud music, families eating nearby, normal, safe. For the first time in days, my wife finally touched her food without shaking. Then her phone vibrated on the table. One message, from my mother. My wife opened it and instantly went pale. I grabbed the phone. It was a picture of us inside the restaurant, taken moments earlier. Below it was one sentence. "You can leave the house, but eventually, you still have to come home." My hands tightened around the phone. The picture had been taken from inside the restaurant. Not outside. Inside. I looked around immediately. Families eating, glasses clinking, waiters moving between tables. For the first time in days, nobody had been watching my wife eat. At least, that's what I thought. "Daniel," my wife whispered. Her face had gone pale again. "We need to leave." That's when I saw him. A man sitting near the back exit. Black cap, dark jacket, coffee untouched, watching us. The second our eyes met, he stood up calmly and walked away. I ran after him. Outside, a bus cut across the road between us, just for a second. But when it passed, he was gone. Near the curb sat a small white envelope. My name was written across it. Inside was an old photograph. My father stood smiling beside my mother. But another woman stood beside them, too, holding the hand of a little boy. My stomach dropped slowly, because the little boy was me, and the woman beside me wasn't my mother. I turned the photo over with shaking hands. One sentence was written on the back. "You were never supposed to remember her." I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. The woman beside me looked familiar. Not clearly, not enough to remember, but enough to make something inside me feel wrong. My wife slowly took the picture from my hand. The second she saw it, her breathing changed. Daniel, you knew? I asked. She looked away immediately. That was enough. The drive home felt endless. Neither of us spoke. The photo stayed on my lap the entire time, like proof of a life I was never told existed. When we walked inside, my mother was setting the dining table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, dinner already prepared. Then she saw the photograph in my hand and froze, not shocked, terrified. I stepped closer. Who is she? My mother didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the picture. Who is she? I asked again, this time louder. My mother slowly sat down, like her legs suddenly couldn't hold her anymore. Then she whispered something that made my entire body go numb. She was your real mother. The room went completely silent, because suddenly, nothing in my life felt real anymore. I laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain refused to accept what I'd just heard. That's not true, I said. My voice sounded weak, almost childish. My mother didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She just sat there staring at the photograph like it had finally caught up to her. She disappeared when you were 5, she said quietly. Your father told everyone she abandoned the family. My stomach twisted. And you believed him? Her eyes slowly lifted to mine. No, she whispered. I knew she didn't leave willingly. The room went cold. What does that mean? I asked, but deep down, I already knew. My wife stayed so close beside me I could feel her shaking. Your father was going to leave us for her, my mother continued. He wanted both families. I felt sick. You said she disappeared. She did. My mother's voice cracked for the first time. 2 weeks before your father died. Silence swallowed the room whole. Then one thought hit me so hard I almost stopped breathing. You think he killed her? My mother closed her eyes, slowly, painfully, then nodded once. And suddenly my father's death didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like panic. The next morning, I drove alone. No destination, no plan, just movement. The photograph sat on the passenger seat beside me. My father, the woman, me. A family I couldn't remember. I stopped outside the old neighborhood where I grew up. Nothing had changed. Same cracked sidewalks, same faded houses. But suddenly, everything looked unfamiliar. An elderly woman watering flowers across the street noticed me staring. Then her expression changed. Slowly, carefully. Daniel? She asked. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard someone from this neighborhood say my name in years. You remember me? I asked. She nodded once, then looked at the photograph in my hand and went pale. That woman, I said quietly. Who was she? The old woman lowered the watering can slowly. She used to wait outside that house every Friday, she whispered. I frowned. What house? She pointed directly at my childhood home. My pulse started pounding. She came looking for you, the woman continued, after she disappeared. The world around me seemed to stop. That's impossible, I said. She's dead. The old woman looked confused, then said something that made the blood drain from my face. Dead, she whispered. Daniel, I saw her 3 months ago. Rain started just before sunset. I sat in my car outside the house for almost 20 minutes, staring at the front door. 3 months ago, that's what the old woman said. 3 months ago, my real mother was alive. Inside, the lights were on downstairs. I could see my mother moving through the kitchen window, cooking again, like always. The smell hit me the second I walked in. Soup. The same soup my father ate before he died. My mother looked up calmly. "You're late," she said. I dropped the photograph onto the table. She's alive. For the first time in days, my mother froze completely. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. "She came back here," I continued. "The neighbors saw her." My voice felt unsteady now. "You told me she disappeared." My mother slowly sat down, like her strength had suddenly left her. Then she whispered, "She was never supposed to come back." The room went silent. Rain hammered against the windows. I stared at her. "What did you do?" Her eyes filled slowly with tears, but when she answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was the one who opened the door for her that night." The next morning, my wife insisted we leave the house. Not for long, just long enough to breathe somewhere my mother couldn't reach. We drove to a small market across town. Crowded streets, loud vendors, heat rising from the pavement. Normal life, or at least something close to it. My wife stayed unusually close beside me the entire time. Every few seconds, she looked over her shoulder, watching, searching. "You really think she'd follow us here?" I asked quietly. My wife didn't answer immediately. Then she stopped walking. Across the street stood an older woman near a fruit stall, headscarf, dark glasses, watching us. The second my wife saw her, all the color drained from her face. "That's her," she whispered. My chest tightened. "Who?" My wife grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Your real mother." Before I could react, the woman turned and disappeared into the crowd. I ran after her, pushing through people, ignoring the shouting behind me. But by the time I reached the corner, she was gone. Only one thing remained. A small paper bag sitting on the ground, still warm. Inside it was fresh bread and a handwritten note. "Don't eat anything she cooks." I stared at the note in my hands. "Don't eat anything she cooks." The exact same warning my wife gave me weeks ago. Only now, it came from the woman my mother claimed disappeared years ago. My wife looked shaken beside me. "She's alive," I whispered. "She's been alive this whole time." We drove home in silence. But the second we stepped inside, something felt wrong. Too quiet. No pots clanging in the kitchen. No smell of food. No humming. "Mom?" I called out. No answer. Then my wife grabbed my wrist suddenly. "Daniel!" Her voice was barely above a whisper. The dining table had already been set. 3 plates, 3 glasses, and fresh soup still steaming in the center. Beside my mother's chair sat an old photograph, different from the first one. This one showed both women standing side by side, my father between them, smiling nervously. My stomach twisted, because written across the bottom in faded ink were 4 words. "The day everything broke." Then I noticed something else. A second note tucked beneath my plate, in my mother's handwriting. "Ask her what really happened that night." Slowly, I turned toward my wife, and for the first time, she looked just as afraid of the truth as I was. My wife didn't touch the note, didn't even look at it again. She just stood there staring at the soup in the middle of the table like it terrified her more than the message itself. "What happened that night?" I asked quietly. No answer. I stepped closer. "What aren't you telling me?" Her eyes slowly lifted to mine, and for the first time since all this started, I saw guilt. Real guilt. "She came to the house that night," my wife whispered. My pulse stumbled. "My real mother?" She nodded once. "She wanted to take you away before your father got home." The room felt smaller around me. "Then what happened?" My wife looked toward the kitchen, toward the empty doorway where my mother usually stood cooking, then back at me. "I called him," she whispered. The words barely registered at first. You... what? Tears filled her eyes instantly. I thought I was helping, she said shakily. Your mother told me your real mother was dangerous. She said she abandoned you once already. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. So you called my father? She nodded again, crying now. And when he came home, her voice broke completely. Everything turned violent. The house fell silent. Then a sound came from upstairs, a floorboard creaking slowly above us. My wife froze, because we both knew one thing instantly. We weren't alone in the house anymore. The floorboard creaked again, slow, heavy, deliberate. Neither of us moved. My wife's fingers locked tightly around my arm. Daniel, she whispered. But my body was already reacting before my mind could catch up. I grabbed the nearest thing on the table, a heavy candle holder, and stepped toward the stairs. Every light upstairs was off, only darkness waiting at the top. Another sound, closer this time, like someone shifting their weight carefully, listening to us below. Who's up there? I shouted. No answer. I started climbing slowly, one step at a time. The old wood creaked beneath my feet. Behind me, I could hear my wife crying softly, telling me not to go. Halfway up the stairs, I noticed something on the wall, fresh water dripping onto the floorboards. My stomach turned, because the drops were leading from the bathroom. The bathroom door upstairs stood slightly open, moving gently, back and forth. I pushed it open completely and froze. The window was wide open to the rain outside. The room was empty, but written across the steamed mirror were 5 words. She lied about more than food. Then I heard my wife scream downstairs. Morning came with heavy rain against the windows. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the message on the bathroom mirror again. She lied about more than food. My wife sat quietly at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. She hadn't spoken much since the scream downstairs. Tell me the truth, I said finally. My voice sounded exhausted now. Not angry, just tired. She looked at me slowly, then toward the bedroom door, making sure it was closed. There's something I never told you about the night your real mother came back, she whispered. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What? She wasn't alone. The room went silent. Before I could speak again, we heard movement downstairs, cabinets opening, plates touching, cooking. My wife instantly went pale. She's making breakfast, she whispered. Then another sound followed. Not my mother's voice, another woman's, soft, calm, unfamiliar. I stood up immediately and moved toward the stairs. The smell of fresh soup drifted upward through the house. But halfway downstairs, I froze, because sitting at our dining table beside my mother was the woman from the photograph, quietly eating breakfast. Nobody spoke when I walked into the dining room. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The smell of soup filled the house, and sitting beside my mother, calmly eating breakfast, was Marion, my real mother. She looked older than the photograph, tired, but alive. My legs felt unsteady. For years, I thought she abandoned me. Then I thought she was dead. Now she was sitting in front of me holding a spoon like none of us had lost half our lives. My wife stayed frozen behind me on the stairs, too afraid to come closer. I never left you willingly, Marion said softly. My chest tightened painfully. Then where were you? Her eyes shifted toward the woman who raised me. She hid me, Marion whispered. The room went silent. My mother lowered her gaze slowly. She came back for you that night, she said quietly. Your father found out. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. What happened? No one died that night, Marion replied. But after your father poisoned me, her voice trembled. She hid me before he could finish it. I turned sharply toward my mother, stunned. She saved your life too, Marion continued. If your father stayed, you would have become him. Everything inside me collapsed at once. My father wasn't the victim. He was the danger all along. Silence filled the dining room. Then my mother quietly pushed the bowl of soup away from Marion, not controlling, not threatening, protective. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood why my wife never ate anything cooked by my mother. Because fear was the only thing keeping this family alive,